There are things you say out loud, and then there are the things you carry. Not because they're shameful, exactly. Sometimes it's not even that. It's more like you've held something for so long that it's taken the shape of you. It fits now. It's warm. And the idea of setting it down, of saying it out loud to another person who has a face and a name and an opinion, yeah, that's the part that stops most people. Here's what I've learned, after sitting with more of these than I can count. Most people don't keep secrets because they're hiding something terrible. They keep them because they don't know if there's a version of the truth that someone else can hold without flinching. And they're not sure they can watch someone flinch. So they stay quiet. In the marriage. In the friendship. In the body. In the middle of the night when the thing they can't say is the loudest sound in the room. You know that feeling, when you're lying next to someone you love, and you are completely, utterly unreachable. Not because you don't want to be found. Because you don't know how to let yourself be. This is where those things come. This is where people say the sentence they've never said before. And I think you might already know why you're here. So, let's begin. We had this thing on Sunday mornings. Coffee, the couch. Phones face down on the kitchen counter. That was the rule. Daniel's rule, actually. The TV would be on but muted, just the crawl of headlines moving across the bottom of the screen. And we'd sit there, his feet tucked under my legs because he was always cold and I was always warm. And we wouldn't talk about anything that mattered. Just the small stuff. The neighbor's dog. A dream one of us half remembered. Whether we needed more coffee? Always yes, always more coffee. I loved those mornings more than I knew how to say. And I think that's where all of this starts, actually. The things I loved too much to name out loud. Because naming them felt like asking for them. And asking for them felt like admitting I wasn't sure they'd always be there. I'm Margot, by the way. Not that it matters for what I'm about to tell you. But it feels strange to talk about the most private parts of my life. Daniel and I had been married for 6 years when the Sundays started to change. Not dramatically. Not in a way I could have pointed to and said, there, that's the moment. It was more like the way a photograph fades. Slowly, and then you notice one day that the colors aren't quite what they were. He started bringing his phone to the couch. Just to check something, he'd say. Just for a second. And I didn't say anything, because what would I say? Put that down, this is our time. It sounded controlling even inside my head. So I'd sit there with my coffee going warm to lukewarm to cold, and I'd watch the muted news. And I'd feel something I didn't have a word for yet. I know now the word was disappointment. But at the time it just felt like a low hum. Background noise. The kind of thing you learn to live around. What I hadn't told Daniel, what I'd been carrying for probably 2 years by then, tucked somewhere between my ribs where it wouldn't bother anyone, was that I'd been feeling invisible to him. In a way that had nothing to do with the big things. The way he used to reach for my hand on the couch and had stopped. The way he used to ask me, at the end of the day, what was the best part? Just that one question. And somewhere along the line he'd stopped asking that too. I hadn't said anything. I kept thinking it would correct itself. The way a plant will lean back toward the light if you just give it time. I was wrong about that. But I didn't know it yet. The moment that cracked things open wasn't loud. That's the part that still gets me. It was a Tuesday evening. I'd made dinner, nothing special, just pasta. The kind of weeknight meal you make without thinking. And I'd lit a candle on the table because I wanted it to feel like something. I don't know. I just wanted one evening that felt intentional. Like we'd chosen to be there, across from each other. Instead of just ending up there out of habit. Daniel came to the table with his phone in his hand. He sat down. He looked at the plate, then at the candle. And then his eyes went back to the screen. And he said, and I need you to understand he wasn't trying to be cruel. I know that now, I knew it even then. He said, did something happen or is this just dinner? And I didn't say anything for a moment. It's just dinner, I said. He nodded. Put the phone face up next to his fork, not away, just face up, and started eating. You know that moment when you realize the conversation already ended? You just didn't hear it close? That was it. That was the door shutting. And I sat across from him in the light of that one candle. And I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt embarrassed. Like I'd tried too hard at something and been caught doing it. Like wanting things to feel special was a little bit foolish. And now I'd been found out. I didn't touch my food for a while. He didn't notice. Later that night I was standing at the kitchen sink. The overhead light buzzing the way it always did. That soft mechanical hum. And Daniel came in behind me and said, not unkindly, "You okay? You got quiet?" And I almost said it. I almost turned around and said, "I miss you." I don't know how to explain that to someone I see every day, but I miss you. Instead I said, "I'm fine, just tired." He said, "Okay," and kissed the back of my head and went to bed. I stood there under that buzzing light for another 10 minutes. I don't know what I was waiting for. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about the frustration that comes after. It doesn't look like anger. It doesn't feel like anger, not at first. It feels more like exhaustion. Like you've been trying to open a door that isn't locked. You're just pushing when you should be pulling. But you've been pushing for so long that you've forgotten there's another option. I started doing this thing where I'd rehearse conversations in my head. I'll tell him tonight. I'll say, "Daniel, I need more from you. Not more of your time, just more of your attention. Just to feel like you still see me." I'd plan the whole thing out, how I'd say it calmly, how I wouldn't cry. And then he'd come home and he'd be tired. Or I'd be tired or dinner would need making. And I'd think, tomorrow. I'll say it tomorrow. Tomorrow kept moving. I started sleeping with my back to his side of the bed. I don't know exactly when that started. He never mentioned it, and I never mentioned it. And that silence felt like its own kind of language. One neither of us had agreed to speak, but both of us understood. The worst part, and I want to be honest about this because I think it's important. The worst part is that I wasn't entirely fair to him. Because Daniel didn't know what I needed. I had never told him. I'd expected him to feel it, the way I felt it. To sense the distance and reach across it. And when he didn't, I took it as evidence that he didn't care. But that's not the same thing, is it? Not caring and not knowing. Those aren't the same thing at all. I think I wanted him to want to know without me having to tell him. And I understand now how unfair that is. But understanding something and being free of it, those are two different things too. Quiet, brief laugh. We really do ask a lot of the people we love. Mostly things we've never said out loud. There was one Sunday, maybe 3 weeks after the candle dinner, when he put his phone down without me asking. Just set it on the counter the way we used to do it, and came and sat next to me, and tucked his feet under my legs the way he always had. And I felt this rush of something, relief maybe, or hope, or just recognition, and I almost said it then. I've missed this. I've missed us doing this. But I let the moment pass. I told myself there would be other Sundays. There were. There were other Sundays. I'm still not sure if I was right to wait, or if waiting was just another word for being afraid. What I know is this. The silence between two people who love each other isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's full of everything they haven't figured out how to say yet. And you can sit in that silence for years. Both of you waiting for the other one to go first. Both of you thinking the other one must not need it as badly. Because if they did, surely they would have said something by now. We still have Sunday mornings. The coffee. The couch. The muted news. Some weeks it feels like it used to. Some weeks it feels like we're both just very carefully pretending. I don't know which one it is today. I think that might be the most honest thing I can tell you. The overhead light in the kitchen still buzzes. We still haven't replaced it. There's something about the things we never say out loud, how they don't disappear. They just find somewhere to live. Inside the performance. Inside the silence. Inside the version of ourselves we decided was easier to offer. She loved him. That was never the question. The question was what love asked her to carry. and whether carrying it quietly was kindness or just a different kind of distance. Have you ever caught yourself wanting something and then, almost in the same breath, talking yourself out of it? Not because it was wrong, but because you couldn't quite picture a world where it was allowed? That's where we're going next. A woman who knows exactly what she wants, has known for years, and has spent those years becoming someone who wants something else entirely. Someone easier to love, she thought. Someone safer to be. She's about to stop pretending. There's a specific kind of quiet that happens right before someone says something they think is a joke, but isn't. You learn to recognize it. The little inhale. The glance around the room to make sure everyone's watching. And then the thing comes out, and everyone laughs, and you laugh too. Because what else are you going to do? You're sitting right there. You're part of the group. I laughed a lot that year. We had a routine, the 6 of us. Every Friday, someone's apartment, whoever had the most space and the least judgmental neighbors. Usually it was Declan's place. This 3rd-floor walk-up in Wicker Park that smelled like old radiator heat. And the sandalwood candle he kept on the windowsill, even though I don't think he ever lit it. He just liked the way it looked. Which, honestly, is such a Declan thing. The aesthetic of something mattering more than the thing itself. There was always a playlist going. Always. Declan controlled it like it was a second job. Indie stuff, mostly. The kind of music that sounds confident about being sad. And we'd drink whatever was cheapest. And talk about our weeks and pretend we were the kind of people who had it figured out. I loved those Fridays. I want to be honest about that. I genuinely loved them. But I also always drove home feeling like I'd been wearing a shirt that was one size too small. And I'd just taken it off in the car, and I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding my breath. Here's the thing about me that I need you to understand before any of this makes sense. I love country music. Not the new stuff that's basically pop with a steel guitar dropped in for decoration. I mean the old stuff. Merle Haggard, Emmylou Harris, Townes Van Zandt, Gillian Welch singing about hard luck and long roads and the specific kind of loneliness that comes from loving someone who doesn't know how to stay. That music. I have a record player in my apartment. I found it at an estate sale for $30 and spent 2 weeks cleaning the needle. I have a milk crate of vinyl that I've been building since college. Cracked sleeves, handwritten labels, records that skip in the same spot every time, and I know exactly when to lift the needle. I know those songs the way you know a scar. You don't look at it anymore? You just know it's there. I never played any of it at Declan's. I'm not even sure when I decided that. It wasn't a conscious choice exactly. It was more like, I read the room once, very early on, and I just knew. The first time I mentioned Townes Van Zandt, Marcus made a face like I'd suggested we eat dinner off the floor. That's like sad cowboy music, he said. And everyone laughed and I laughed, and that was that. I stopped mentioning it. It's funny, the things you learn to fold up and put away. I kept my records in the corner of my bedroom, behind the lamp, like they were something I needed to hide. I still listened to them, every morning, before the world got loud. I'd put something on and drink my coffee and just be for a little while. Gillian Welch's voice filling the room like light through a window. It was the best part of my day, most days. But outside of that room, I was whoever the group needed me to be. I had opinions about the bands Declan liked. I knew which new releases Priya was excited about. I could talk about all of it. And I did. I got good at it. What I didn't realize, what takes a long time to see, is that performing fluency in someone else's taste is not the same as being known. The night it finally broke open was a Tuesday. Not even a Friday. Just a random Tuesday in November when Priya texted the group chat saying she had leftover soup and did anyone want to come over. And 3 of us did. Me, Marcus, and Joel ended up on Priya's couch, soup and bowls. Some documentary about street art playing on her laptop that nobody was really watching. It was easy. Low stakes. The kind of night you don't remember until suddenly you do. Priya was going through a playlist on her phone, half listening to herself. And she stopped on something and said, "Oh, this is actually really good. Have you guys heard this?" It was a Gillian Welch song. Everything is free. And I felt something move in my chest. Like, oh, here it is. Here's my thing, walking into the room without me. Who is this? Joel asked. Gillian Welch, Priya said. I found her through a film score thing. She's kind of folky, I don't know. It's sad but not annoying sad. I love her, I said. And I meant it simply. I said it the way you'd say I love this restaurant or I love that movie. Just a fact, just a true thing. Marcus looked at me. Not mean, not immediately. Just surprised. You do? Yeah. I have like 4 of her records. A beat. The kind of beat that has weight. Since when? Since always, I said. I just don't usually bring it up. Why not? And I looked at him. I really looked at him. And I said, because of the face you're making right now. The room didn't explode. It didn't go cold exactly. It just shifted. The way a conversation shifts when someone says the true thing instead of the easy thing. Marcus opened his mouth and then closed it. Joel was looking at the laptop screen like it had gotten very interesting. Priya was very still. I'm not making a face, Marcus said. You made the same face the first time I mentioned Townes Van Zandt, I said. Like I'd said something embarrassing. I mean, it's just not really, he gestured vaguely. At the air. At some invisible standard that apparently existed in the air. It's not really our thing. And there it was. Our thing. I sat with that for a second. I let it just sit there, between us, in Priya's living room with Gillian Welch still playing softly from the phone. It's my thing, I said. It's been my thing for years. You just didn't know about it because I didn't tell you. Why didn't you tell us? Because, sighs, because I didn't want to do this. Nobody said anything for a moment. And then Priya, quietly, turned the volume up a little. Not a lot. Just enough to make a point. Or maybe not a point, maybe just a gesture. The way you hand someone a glass of water when you don't know what else to do. I looked at her. She shrugged one shoulder. The Gillian Welch song kept going. Marcus picked up his soup bowl and stared into it like it contained some kind of answer. Joel said, I actually think this is kind of nice, meaning the music. And I knew he meant it kindly, but it also landed like a verdict. Kind of nice, the way people describe things they're tolerating. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to right then. But something had changed. I'd said the true thing out loud and it hadn't killed me. And that felt like, I don't know. Like finding out a room in your apartment is bigger than you thought. Marcus and I didn't fight about it. We didn't have a big moment. What happened was quieter and in some ways, harder. We just grew a little more honest with each other. Which meant the distance between us became visible. And once you can see a distance, you can't really pretend it isn't there. He texted me a few days later. Said he didn't mean to make me feel like I couldn't talk about stuff I liked. I said I knew. I said I thought I'd done most of that to myself. Which was true. I had. I'd been so afraid of the face that I just preemptively made the face for him. That's the thing nobody tells you about belonging to a group. Sometimes you're the one doing the erasing. Sometimes you hand them the pen. I started bringing records to Declan's on Fridays. Not every week. Not as a statement. Just sometimes. I'd show up with something under my arm and I'd say, I want to play one song, and I'd play it. And some people liked it and some people didn't. And Declan made a face the first time. And then the second time he asked what the album was called. Priya downloaded 3 Emmylou Harris records. She texted me about them at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday like they were urgent news, which I kind of think they were. Joel still says it's not really his thing, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be everyone's thing. It just has to be mine. My record player is still in the corner of my bedroom. I moved the lamp. It's not behind anything anymore. Some mornings I put on something slow and I drink my coffee. And I think about all the years I spent laughing at jokes that weren't funny to me. And I don't feel angry about it exactly. I feel something more like wistful, maybe. A little tender. Like looking at an old photo of yourself and recognizing the person but not quite being able to remember what it felt like to be them. I was so careful. I was so careful for so long. And the music was always there. Every morning in that room, just waiting. Patient as anything. The way good things tend to be. You know what Townes Van Zandt said about songwriting? He said the song already exists. You're not creating it. You're just finding it. Clearing away everything that isn't the song until what's left is the thing that was always there. I think about that a lot. I think about what's left when you stop performing. When you stop laughing at the right moments and nodding at the right things and folding yourself up to fit the shape of a room. What's left is usually smaller than you expected. And usually, if you're lucky, it's exactly enough. A slow exhale at that, yeah. There's something about finally saying the true thing. Not the version you've rehearsed. Not the one that sounds less strange in daylight. But the actual thing. The one that's been living in your chest, quiet and patient, waiting. You know that feeling when the relief of it almost breaks you a little? When you thought the confession would make you smaller. And instead, it just makes you real? She wanted to lead. He wanted to follow. And neither of them had words for it that didn't feel borrowed from somewhere wrong. The next voice found his own words. Eventually. It cost him something to get there. Let's hear it. I started noticing the cereal bowl first. That sounds like nothing. I know it sounds like nothing. But Marcus had eaten the same breakfast for 11 years. Black coffee, 2 eggs, whatever was left in the pan from the night before. He called cereal a child's apology for food. He said it like it was a personality. Like it was him. And then one morning in February, I came downstairs, and there it was. A bowl. Milk still clouding at the edges. A spoon left in the sink instead of the dishwasher. Which he always did when he was moving fast, when he was thinking about something else. When his mind was already somewhere I wasn't. I didn't say anything. I washed the spoon and put it away. That's the thing about living with someone for over a decade. You learn to absorb the small wrongnesses. You file them somewhere. You tell yourself it's nothing because nothing is easier than something. Our house is a 1940s colonial on a street where all the driveways tilt slightly toward the road. Ours tilts worst. Every winter I think we're going to lose a car to it, and every spring I forget to call someone about it. That's kind of how we were. Always meaning to fix things, always getting through the season first. The kitchen faces east. In the mornings, if you stand at the sink, the light comes in at this low angle and catches everything. The dust on the windowsill, the water spots on the faucet, the things you've been meaning to clean since October. I used to love that light. It felt like the house was being honest with you. Nora and Caleb, our kids, 6 and 9, they'd come down before us most mornings. They set up their cereal bowls like a small assembly line. Caleb always got the blue bowl. Nora always got the one with the chip in the rim that she called its face. Marcus would come down and ruffle their hair and pour his coffee. I would stand at the counter making lunches, and it was ordinary. It was the kind of ordinary that you don't understand is everything until it isn't. We had a routine the way old houses have wallpaper. Layer on layer. You stop seeing it after a while? I found out on a Tuesday. I want to be specific about that because people always imagine it happens on some charged night. Some moment already crackling with tension. It doesn't. It happens on a Tuesday in March when the kids are at school. And you're looking for the insurance card because Nora has a dentist appointment Thursday. You go into his jacket, the gray one, the one that's been hanging by the door since November. And you find his phone in the inside pocket. Because that's where he always puts it, and it's unlocked. Because he was in a hurry that morning. And you're not even looking, you're just moving it out of the way. And then, you know that feeling when you already know the answer but you ask anyway? Because asking makes it real, and not asking means you can still pretend? I stood there in the front hallway for, I don't know, long enough that the light moved. Her name was in the messages as K. Just a letter. Which is its own kind of thing, isn't it? Not a name. Not even the courtesy of a name. I put the phone back in the pocket. I found the insurance card. I made a note about Thursday. I didn't say anything that night. Or the next night. I watched him. I watched him in this horrible, clinical way I didn't know I was capable of. The way he touched the back of my chair when he walked past it at dinner. The way he asked Caleb about his math test. The way he laughed at something on television. I kept thinking, is this real? Is any of this real? Is he performing or is he actually here? And if he's actually here, then what does that mean about everything else? On the third night, after the kids were in bed, I was at the kitchen sink. That east-facing window, but at night, so it was just black glass. And my own reflection looking back at me. He came in behind me and said, "You okay? You've been quiet." And I almost said yes. I had it right there. Yeah, just tired. 4 words and another night of nothing. Instead I said, "Who's Kay?" The silence that followed was maybe 3 seconds. I counted them in my reflection. He said, "What?" I said, "In your phone. Kay, who is that?" And he said, and I want you to hear how he said this because it matters. He said, "It wasn't what you think." Quietly. Like he was disappointed in me for asking. Like I was the one making something out of nothing. I said, "Okay. Just okay." I didn't fight him on it. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry, not right there. I just turned off the faucet and dried my hands on the dish towel. The one with the little lemons on it that Nora picked out at a craft fair 2 summers ago. I folded it over the oven handle and I said, "I'm going to bed." He said, "We should talk about this." And I said, "I know." And I went upstairs. I lay in our bed in the dark and I listened to him move around the kitchen for a while. And then I listened to him come up the stairs. And I listened to him brush his teeth. And then he got into bed on his side and neither of us said anything. And I lay there thinking, this is the same bed. This is the same ceiling. These are the same sounds. And somehow that was the worst part. That everything was still the same. That was 4 months ago. I know what you're thinking. I know because I thought it too, before this was my life. You're thinking, why are you still there? And I want to explain it to you. But I also want to be honest that I can't explain it completely. There's Nora and Caleb, obviously. There's the tilted driveway and the mortgage. And the fact that I went back to part-time when Nora was born. Rebuilding, that is. It's not impossible, but it's not nothing either. There's the fact that I have sat in this kitchen for 11 years. And watched that east light come in every morning. And I don't know who I am in a different kitchen yet. But there's also something else. Something I almost don't want to say. I still love him. Or I love something that used to be him. Or I love the version of this house where he hadn't done this yet. I can't always tell the difference. You know that specific kind of tired, not sleep tired, but soul tired. Where even the idea of making a decision feels like lifting something too heavy. That's where I live right now. In the gap between knowing and doing. We pass the salt at dinner. He helps Caleb with his homework. I tuck Nora in and she asks me to do the voice for her stuffed rabbit. And I do the voice. I always do the voice. Because she's 6 and she doesn't know that anything is wrong. And I am not ready for her to know. Last week I went into the bathroom in the middle of the night. And I sat on the edge of the tub with the faucet running, not for any reason. Just so there was a sound that was mine. And I stayed there for a long time. Not thinking. Just being in a room by myself, which is the only place I feel like I can breathe right now. The cereal bowl is still happening, by the way. Every few mornings. Just sitting there when I come downstairs. I don't know what it means. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe he just decided he likes cereal now. Maybe whatever this is changed something in him I can't see and he's just eating cereal. And I'm the one making it into something. Or maybe it's her. Maybe that's something she does and it followed him home. I haven't asked. I don't know if I'm afraid of the answer. Or if I'm afraid that I'll ask and he'll tell me and then I'll have to decide something. I wash it every morning. I put it back in the cabinet. I make the kids' lunches. I stand at that east-facing window, and I watch the light come in and catch all the things I haven't cleaned yet. And I think I don't know what I'm waiting for. I keep coming back to that word, watching. How it's possible to be inside your own life, inside your own home, your own bed, your own choices, and still be somewhere just outside the glass. Looking in, waiting to feel like it's yours. That's a particular kind of alone. Someone else wrote to us. Took him 39 years to find the words, and even then, he almost didn't send them. What he wanted to say wasn't about a person or a moment. It was about something smaller. Something he'd been given over and over without knowing how to take it. He's still learning. Aren't we all? There's a specific smell I associate with trying. Cedarwood and something synthetic underneath it. The cologne I wore every time I thought it mattered. I used to spray it on before dates the way some people say a prayer. Like if I got the details right, the rest would follow. I was 26. Living in a one-bedroom in Portland with a radiator that knocked every night at 2 a.m. I worked in logistics, which meant I spent most of my days making sure things arrived where they were supposed to, when they were supposed to, in the condition they were promised. I was, I think, trying to do the same thing with my personal life. Coordinate the variables. Minimize the damage in transit. I had a system. I don't know when I built it or who handed me the blueprint, but I had one. First date, be curious, not eager. Ask questions, but not too many. You don't want to seem like you're conducting an interview. Laugh at the right moments. Touch your glass when they touch theirs, not before. Second date, let them talk more. Show vulnerability, but calibrated vulnerability. Something that sounds open but doesn't actually cost you anything. Something like, I'm still figuring out what I want, which is technically true of every living person on Earth and therefore reveals nothing. I had benchmarks. Actual benchmarks. I knew what a good date felt like. Not because I'd felt it, but because I'd read about it, watched it, absorbed it from some ambient cultural frequency I couldn't name or turn off. Good dates had a certain momentum, a certain rhythm. You could feel it building toward something. And if I felt that momentum, I told myself, this is it. This is what it's supposed to feel like. I dated a woman named Claire for almost 8 months. She was smart, genuinely funny, worked in urban planning and cared about it in a way that made her face change when she talked about it. She was, by every metric I had constructed, exactly right. We went to the right restaurants. We had the right arguments, the kind that end in understanding rather than silence. We made each other laugh. We looked good in photos, which I know sounds like a shallow thing to say, but I think I was using it as evidence. Like if we looked like the thing from the outside, eventually we'd become it from the inside. We broke up on a Tuesday in March. She cried. I held her, and I said the right things, and I meant them in the way that you can mean something without it touching you. And afterward I drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. I couldn't figure out what I was feeling, which I told myself was grief. Which I told myself was normal. But it wasn't grief. It was something quieter than that. Something more like relief, and then immediately shame about the relief, and then confusion about the shame. I didn't understand it yet. I wouldn't for a while. His name was Marcus. We'd known each other peripherally for about 2 years. He was friends with my coworker Danny, and we'd ended up at the same birthday dinners. The same backyard things, that orbit of people you're friendly with but don't really know. He was quiet in groups. The kind of quiet that doesn't seem like shyness, more like he was listening to something the rest of us weren't. He fixed vintage cameras as a hobby, which I thought was pretentious the first time I heard it, and then later understood was just something he genuinely loved. We started spending time together after Claire. Nothing dramatic. He texted me after Danny mentioned I was going through it. Just said, hey, you want to get terrible coffee sometime? I know a place that's reliably bad. And I laughed, and we went. The coffee was genuinely terrible. We started meeting once a week, then twice. Not dates. I wasn't calling them that. We'd sit in his apartment, 3rd floor of an old building in Northeast. The kind with the high ceilings and the drafty windows. The afternoon light that came in sideways and made everything look like it was inside a photograph. And we'd just talk. Or not talk. He had this record player, and he was always putting something on, and then forgetting he'd put it on. And we'd both just be sitting there in the music without having chosen it. He didn't run the script I was used to. He didn't ask questions the right way. He asked them in the middle of other things, like they'd occurred to him genuinely, rather than as a conversational strategy. He'd be talking about a lens he was trying to find, and then he'd just stop and go, "Do you actually like your job? Like, does it do anything for you?" And I'd start to give my usual answer, the one about stability and the satisfaction of systems. And he'd look at me with this expression that wasn't skeptical exactly, just patient. Like he had nowhere to be, and we could sit here until I found the real answer. I hated it. For a while, I genuinely hated it. The moment I keep coming back to happened on a night in October. We were in his kitchen. He was making pasta, the kind with a lot of steps that he made look effortless. I was sitting on the counter, which I always did because there was only one bar stool and it wobbled. We'd been talking about something I can't remember now, and then we weren't talking. And the quiet was the comfortable kind. And then out of nowhere he said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." "What are you actually afraid of? Like, with people, with being close to people?" I laughed. I did the thing I always did. I tilted my head slightly. I made a self-deprecating face. I started to say something about being an only child, which is the answer I'd given before, and which sounds vulnerable without being vulnerable. And I got maybe 3 words in, and then I stopped. Because I caught myself doing it. Not the content of it, the mechanics of it, the tilt of the head, the preloaded answer, the calibration. I saw myself from the outside for just a second. Like something had shifted 1 degree, and I was watching myself perform the response to an honest question. And the performance was so practiced I hadn't even noticed I was performing it. Marcus wasn't looking at me like he was waiting for the right answer. He was just looking at me. Like whatever I said, that would be the thing, and we'd go from there. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I said, "I think I'm afraid that if I stop doing all the things I'm supposed to do, there won't be anything underneath. Like I'll just be this guy standing there with nothing to offer." He nodded slowly. Not like he'd been expecting that. Like he was actually receiving it. "That sounds exhausting," he said. Just that. Not a solution. Not a reframe. Just the acknowledgement that carrying something heavy is heavy. And I felt something in my chest do something I don't have a good word for. Not crack, that's too dramatic. More like ease. Like a door that's been stuck finally moving a 1/4 inch on its hinges. You know that moment when you realize you've been holding your breath? Not for a minute, but for years? I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that, because in the version of this story that exists in movies, I would have cried. I didn't. I just sat there on his wobbly counter while the pasta water boiled over a little. And I thought, I've never actually said that to anyone. And then, immediately after, I've never actually said that to anyone. The weeks after that were strange in a way that's hard to explain. Nothing dramatic happened. Marcus and I kept meeting. We ate the pasta. We talked about other things. The world didn't rearrange itself around the confession. But I started noticing things. I noticed that when I was getting ready to see him, I didn't spray the cedar cologne. Not as a decision, I just didn't reach for it. I noticed that I wasn't running the mental checklist on the walk over. I noticed that when something occurred to me, I said it. And when I didn't know the answer to something, I said that too. And the sky didn't fall. I started noticing the same thing in other parts of my life. The way I'd been half present in conversations for years. Running a quiet background process. Am I coming across right? Am I being too much? Not enough. Is this landing the way it's supposed to land? And how much energy that had taken. How it had left me tired in a way I'd attributed to work, to the city, to being in my mid-20s. How I'd been so busy managing the reception of myself that I'd never really shown up to anything. I want to be careful here, because I don't want to make this sound like I figured something out. I didn't figure something out. I started to suspect something. about the difference between the version of closeness I'd been chasing and something that felt. When I accidentally touched it, completely different. Quieter. Less photogenic. More like two people sitting in a kitchen while the water boils over saying true things. I don't know what Marcus is to me exactly. I don't know how to categorize it, and I've stopped trying. What I know is that he's the first person I've spent real time with where I wasn't keeping score. Where I wasn't watching the momentum build towards something. Where I wasn't performing the version of myself I thought would be received well, and then going home and wondering why I felt alone. I think I'd been grading intimacy on a rubric I'd never examined. And the rubric was wrong. Not wrong, just drawn for a territory that wasn't mine. A map that looked right until you tried to navigate somewhere real and kept ending up in the same empty field wondering what you'd missed. Last week I was getting ready to go somewhere, just dinner with Danny and some people, nothing significant. And I picked up the cedar cologne out of habit, and I held it for a second. And I put it back. Not as a statement. Not as a ritual. Just because I didn't need it the way I used to need it. Because I'm not trying to arrive at anything the way I used to arrive at things. All managed and prepared and ready to be received. I don't know if that's growth. I'm a little suspicious of the word. But something is different. Something in the way I stand in a room when I walk into one. Something in the way I can sit with someone now without needing the silence to mean something. Without needing the conversation to be building towards some proof that this is working. That I am working. That everything is arriving on time and intact and in the condition it was promised. I'm still learning how to be in the room. I think I'm going to be learning that for a long time. I don't know if you've ever felt this. I hope you haven't. But I think maybe you have that specific exhaustion of always being your own stage manager. Always adjusting the lights before anyone walks in. If you have, I just want you to know that somewhere in a drafty apartment with bad afternoon light, and a record playing that no one chose, I accidentally stopped. And it felt like the first thing I'd felt in years. Yeah, there it is, just sitting there now, in the quiet after all of that. You know that feeling when you've been carrying something for so long that you don't even notice the weight anymore? And then someone says a thing, or you hear a thing, and suddenly your arms are just tired? Like the carrying catches up with you all at once? That's what this is. That's what today was. These weren't stories about bad people. They weren't cautionary tales. They were just people, trying to love each other without the right words. Wanting to be wanted in ways they'd never said out loud. Realizing, sometimes too late, sometimes just in time, that the version of themselves they'd been hiding was the one that needed the most air. If something in here found you, if one of these voices said something that sounded a little too close to something you've never told anyone, you can leave it here. In the comments. Anonymously, honestly, messily, however it comes out. This isn't a place where you have to have it figured out. Nobody here has it figured out. That's kind of the whole point. Confessed is here every week. And so are we. The heaviest secrets aren't the ones we're ashamed of. They're the ones we're afraid nobody else is carrying too.